In the summer of 1676, several hundred armed men marched on Jamestown, Virginia, and burned it down. Fighting side by side were enslaved Africans, indentured servants from Ireland and England, and free farmers who owned almost nothing. For a few months, they stopped seeing each other as different and saw the same enemy, a handful of wealthy landowners and the governor who protected them. Bacon's rebellion was crushed within a year, but the planter class learned something more valuable than victory. If you don't want the poor to unite again, make sure the people who might light the next torch never see themselves as allies. Within a generation, Virginia's elite had done something no army could. They invented race as a legal category, granting poor white colonists small privileges an enslaved or free black neighbor could never have. Almost overnight, a hierarchy appeared where a shared class interest had briefly existed. That is the first known blueprint of a technology still in daily use. Call it the horizontal war. In any system built on extraction, anger has two directions. It can travel vertically, upward, toward whoever owns the mine, the factory, the bank, the platform. Or it can travel horizontally, sideways, toward whoever is standing next to you, praying to a different god, following a different sect of the same one, speaking with a different accent, or holding a diploma you don't have. Power has always known that vertical anger, left alone, eventually organizes. It forms unions, fills city squares, rewrites constitutions. So the project of every ruling class has been to keep that anger moving sideways instead. In the American South of the 1890s, a coalition of poor farmers, black and white, came close to breaking the planter class's grip on the region. It was dismantled not by argument, but by the return of racial terror and Jim Crow law, engineered by the very landowners both groups had organized against. What has changed since then is not the strategy, it is the plumbing. Today, the buffer between the people who own the system and the people who work inside it has a name: the professional managerial class, the managers, consultants, HR departments, and media producers who didn't design the machine but are paid to keep it running quietly. Their real function is translation, turning a raw economic grievance, "I cannot afford to live," into a cultural or psychological one that never quite reaches the people at the top. Most of them are not villains, they are shock absorbers, the padding between capital and the consequences of capital. The mine became a mortgage, the company store became a credit card, debt became the new chain, invisible but load-bearing, keeping millions one missed payment from losing everything. In 2008, the architects of the collapse were made financially whole within months, while the families who lost their homes were lectured publicly about personal responsibility. The anger that should have traveled straight up the chain of command was redirected sideways, toward immigrants, toward the poor, toward whichever group the moment made convenient. This isn't only a domestic trick. Colonial administrators ran the same architecture on entire nations, classifying colonized peoples into competing ethnic, religious, and sectarian hierarchies and issuing identity papers, so a unified independence movement would never form. Today, the scale is global, but the design is unchanged. Workers in different countries bid against each other for the same jobs, while capital crosses every border without ever needing a passport. Which brings us to now. Household debt sits at levels that would have triggered alarm a generation ago. An entire generation did everything it was told to do and still cannot afford the life its parents had. Yet the loudest arguments of our moment are rarely about landlords, shareholders, or the architecture of debt itself. They're about the neighbor, the newcomer, the other side of an old and comfortable divide. Which raises the only question that matters. Are we living through a Bacon's Rebellion moment right now, a rare window where people across race, religion, and education level might recognize a shared material interest? Or has that window already been quietly closed by the same old technology wearing new clothes? If you want a way to tell the difference, here is the only survival guide you need. Whenever a new enemy is handed to you to explain your economic pain, stop and ask who actually owns the thing you depend on to live. Follow the profit, not the outrage. Money moves quietly, while anger is made loud on purpose. Look for the shared interest before you accept the assigned difference, and treat any story that turns the many against the many, instead of the many against the few, as a story worth investigating before you believe it. Because the war was never really between us. It was only ever bent sideways. And the moment enough people look up instead of around is the moment the entire design stops working.